everyone, welcome back to the Stitches and Scribbles channel. My name is Erin and today we're doing another Hexagon cardigan tutorial. So if you've been around on my channel for a while, I've got a couple of Hexagon tutorials already out that you can go watch. I have one for the basic granny square version, I have one for a short sleeved granny square version, and I have one for the moss stitch or linen stitch. It's called both, and you can check those out. There's actually a Hexagon cardigan playlist on my channel, so you can see them all at once, pick your favorite. Today we're going to be making another variation, and just for the purposes of this tutorial, I am going to be making a mini cardigan again. This is my original Hexagon cardigan from the first tutorial I made, and I have my little teddy bear model here for us. I did finish one side already, so I wanted to show you what that looks like. Today we're going to be doing a Farmhouse granny square cardigan. The Farmhouse granny square is something that I've seen on Pinterest and here on YouTube for a while. They seem to all be about the same, but it gets used very frequently in patterns. But it's basically a double crochet solid motif with these puff stitches to decorate the corners. So on an actual granny square, you would just see kind of those puff stitches make an X shape, but on our cardigan you'd have one traveling diagonally along your sleeve, so it would probably meet kind of somewhere down the sleeve a little bit. You have one crossing from the armpit up to the top edge of the cardigan, so like right where it would meet in the middle, and one going down to the bottom edge as well. But we're going to go ahead and get started making our little hexagon motif. So I'm going to switch cameras so you can see what I'm doing. Alright, for this tutorial, again, here's the one that I already did that I showed in the previous clip. But in order to make this sweater, I'm using a 5mm hook. You can use whatever hook size works for your yarn, because you can just continue this pattern in as many rows as you want in order to get your desired size. And then I am just using a plain old worsted weight acrylic yarn to do this. This is a leftover, I believe, Craft Smart yarn from Michaels, but I've had it for a while, so I no longer have the label on it. To start this sweater, we're going to start with a chain 4. If you prefer to use a magic loop for this, that's fine. I just don't prefer to use magic loop because I find that it breaks and doesn't work the way I want it to and stuff like that. So I'm going to start with a chain 4 and then slip stitch into that first chain to make a tiny little ring. This ring is going to feel tight as we're working the first row, but that'll prevent you from having like a huge hole in the armpit of the sweater as we keep going. I'm going to start with a chain 2. This is going to set us up to begin our first cluster. Going back to the piece I already finished, I'll flatten it out so that you can see. It has mostly double crochets with these cluster stitches along each corner. Fold it up so we can see it a little bit more flat. So in order to start the first row, we're doing a row of all clusters. There are 2 clusters in each corner. So for the first row, we're creating those corners and setting up the sides. So we're going to have 12 clusters total because we have 6 sides. We're also going to be starting in the middle of a side, so with one of our clusters going all the way around and finishing the other cluster for that side and then joining. So doing our first cluster, you're going to yarn over, then insert into that chain 4 loop, draw up a loop, and then draw through 2, yarn over, insert, pull up, draw through 2, and then do that one more time. Yarn over, insert, and then draw through 2 so that you have 4 loops on your hook. Then draw through all of the loops. And that made one cluster. So again, this is half of our first side. We'll come back and finish the other half of this side at the end. we're going to chain 4 to create our corner and then begin another cluster. So we've got 2 loops, 3 loops, and 4 loops, then draw through all 4. So now we've got half of a side, a corner, and another half of a side. So we're going to chain 2, and that's going to be our side space. And then do another cluster, yarn over, insert, draw up a loop, draw through 2, yarn over, insert, draw up a loop, draw through 2, yarn over, insert, draw up a loop, draw through 2, and then through all 4. So now we have half a side, a corner, and a full side. So we're ready to make another corner by chaining 4. Now we're going to continue with another cluster. And chain 2 to make our side. Now we're going to do another cluster to finish this side. And chain 4 to make the next corner. Start another cluster. And chain 2 for the side. Create another cluster. Draw through all 4 loops. And chain 4 for the corner. Now we're going to do another cluster. And if this were a square we were making instead of a hexagon, after this cluster we would chain 2 and join, because we've got 4 corners, but we actually need 6 corners to do this. So we're going to keep going. So chain 2, do another cluster, chain 4 for corner number 5, do another cluster, draw through all the loops and chain 2, now do another cluster, and chain 4 to make our 6th corner, and now do one final cluster to finish off the side that we started with. And then chain 2 and join into the top of the puff stitch that we started with to join it together. Now we're ready for our second row, and I'm going to go back to my other piece to show you what's going on. So for the second row, we're going to be doing 3 double crochets in each chain 2 space, chaining 2 on either side of those double crochets, and then doing our corners the same way we did before with 2 puff stitches and a chain 4. So we're starting in the middle of a row this time, and we're starting at the end of a chain 2 space. So what we're actually going to do is chain 3, which will count as our 3rd double crochet for that chain space. We'll do the other 2 on the other side. But we're also going to chain an additional 2, so a total of 5, to also be our chain 2 space. Now we're going to go right into the corner with a cluster and chain 4, and then do another cluster in that same corner, and chain 2 on the other side of the cluster. Now we've reached a chain 2 space in our previous row, and we're going to put 3 regular double crochets in there, so not a cluster. Then chain 2 and do a cluster in the corner. And chain 4, do another cluster in the corner, and chain 2. Then in that chain 2 space from the previous row, we're going to do 3 regular double crochets, and chain 2, then do a double crochet in the, or not a double crochet, a cluster in the corner, and chain 4. We're going to keep going in this pattern all the way around, so doing the double crochets in the chain 2 spaces and the clusters and chain 4s in the corners. So I'm going to keep going with another cluster here. Chain 2, 3 double crochets in that chain 2 space, chain 2, add another corner, so we're going to do a cluster, chain 4, and do another cluster. Then chain 2, do 3 double crochets in the chain 2 space from the previous row, chain 2, do a cluster, chain 4, and do another cluster. Chain 2, do 3 double crochets in that chain 2 space from the previous row, chain 2, do a cluster, chain 4, do another cluster, chain 2, and now that we're almost back to the beginning of the row, we're going to do 2 double crochets because we did our chain 3 at the beginning of the row to count as our 3rd double crochet, and join by doing a slip stitch into the 3rd double crochet, just like that. So now moving on, I'm going to use this example again. We just did this row that has those 3 double crochets, so in every row past this, when you hit a chain 2 space in the previous row, you're going to put 2 double crochets there, not 3. So the way rows are going to go, you're going to do your cluster corner situation the same way. You're going to put 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space, a double crochet in every stitch across, and then another 2 double crochets, your chain 2, and then your corner again. So a little different from the last time, and I'll show you what happens if you do 3 instead of 2. You end up with a shape that goes like this and gets kind of wonky. So if you want a very bell-sleeved and flared cardigan, I guess you could do that intentionally, but that's not really how this works. You want to get that nice tight L shape ideally. So we're just going to do 2. I did have to refilm this part of the tutorial because clearly I messed up last time and did 3, but that's okay. We're learning. So we're going to start with a chain 3. That's going to count as our first double crochet in this chain 2 space, so we're just going to add 1 more. Or wait, no. I said this wrong the last time too. Your chain 3 is going to count as the double crochet directly above the one in the previous row. So above this chain 3, and this is 1. So we are going to put 2 in that chain 2 space. And then when we come back around, we'll just do 2 here instead of 3 across. Then we're going to chain 2, do our cluster in the corner, chain 4, do Do another cluster in the corner. Chain 2. In the chain 2 space, we're going to put 2 double crochets. And now we're going to double crochet in each double crochet across from the previous row, so 3. And then put 2 double crochets in that chain 2 space. Then we're going to chain 2 and do our corner. So a cluster stitch, chain 4, another cluster stitch, chain 2, 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space, and a double crochet in all the previous double crochets, two double crochets in the chain 2 space, chain 2, and then our corner again, so a cluster stitch, chain 4, another cluster, chain 2, do 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space, a double crochet in each of the double crochets from the previous row, and 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space, then chain 2. We're ready for another corner. So cluster stitch, chain 4, cluster stitch again, chain 2, 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space, and a double crochet in each of the double crochets, two double crochets in the chain 2 space. Now we're at another corner, so chain 2, then do a cluster stitch, chain 4, then another cluster, chain 2, 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space, and a double crochet in each of the double crochets, and chain 2, or not chain 2, 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space, then chain 2, and we're at another corner, so we do a cluster, chain 4, do another cluster, chain 2, do 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space, and we'll finish our double crochets across, so we're only going to do 2. Since our chain 3 counted as that third double crochet, we're just going to slip stitch into the top of that chain 3 to finish off the row. You can repeat row 3 as many times as you need to get your desired size of the cardigan. But what you're always going to do is make your corners 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space, double crochet until the next chain 2 space, 2 more double crochet in that space, chain 2, and create your corner. So I only have 1 more row left to do to get to my desired size. I'm going to do that off camera and then talk a little bit about how you can shape your pieces further. Now that I have both sides done, I want to talk a little bit about some alterations that you can make to this pattern, as well as like how to do sizing and stuff. So there's a couple points at which you can stop making your hexagons. The most common way to do these is to get a cardigan that is slightly cropped, I can't say words today, and has really baggy sleeves. So the way you would do that is you would keep adding rows until the width of your cardigan was the width of the body size that you want. And you can see I haven't sewn these pieces together yet, but that is what you would do for that type of cardigan. And it would give you sleeves that are the same width as half of your body section, which is what I have here right now. Some other ways you could do it: you could stop when you get to the sleeve width that you want, and then you would just continue around the back, the bottom, and the front of each hexagon. So you could sew up the top sleeves and just continue on the sides that you want. The other way you could do it is getting to the sleeve and body section that you want for a tighter fitting cardigan and then just extend on the bottom. The only difference that's going to come on with extending this style of pattern versus a traditional granny square style of this cardigan is that you have 2 different stitches going here. So what I would recommend is, if you are continuing the section in such a way that you're still increasing in a corner, go ahead and keep adding those puff stitches. But if you're working on a section where you're not increasing in the corner, then switch to doing all double crochet. So for example, if you were just going to build up the bottom, you wouldn't be pulling this corner out, you'd just be going down. So I would fill in those 2 double crochets here, put 1 in the top of the puff stitch, and then 2 into the corner opening, and then you could just keep double crocheting. So that part's kind of up to you depending on how you want to extend it, but that's what I would recommend. I'm going to go ahead and sew up this mini cardigan and show you the finished piece. And this is the finished sweater on my teddy bear model. My camera's bouncing a little bit, sorry about that. So you can see those little puff stitches kind of going down the arm and meeting around the wrist. They go up diagonally across the chest as well as down diagonally. It's a little hard to see on such a tiny version, but this is what the back looks like. And I just think that this is a really cute sweater design and definitely a fun twist on the hexagon cardigan. If you're looking for an easier way to follow this or asking about a written pattern, I don't have a written pattern for this because the Farmhouse Granny Square is something that has been around for a while. I've seen lots of free patterns for it on Pinterest, so I don't really feel comfortable taking that and claiming it as mine and making it a paid pattern. But I will say, if you want to follow a written pattern for this, you can look up any Farmhouse Granny Square pattern and follow the pattern as written, but instead of doing 4 sides for your motif, just do 6 instead. Otherwise, it's identical. So you can use that as a way to follow the stitch pattern in a written form, since there isn't one for this cardigan specifically. I'm planning on making a full size of this for myself at some point, but I'm not quite ready to do that yet, which is why we have our little bear friend today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Don't forget to tag me on Instagram if you choose to recreate it. I'd love to see your recreations of this design, or send them to me as messages if you don't want to post them. I've had people do that in the past as well. But if you want to follow me on other social media, including Instagram, that information is in the description box below. Thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.